Do you believe the Chicago Bears will build a new stadium on the lakefront?
I am confident that the Chicago Bears will have a new stadium that we'll be able to play in. I still believe that the museum campus on the lakefront is an absolutely perfect location. Chicago is the greatest city in the world. College football playoff game, Big Ten championship games, Super Bowl, concert. This event should be happening here in Chicago. Right now, I know the focus is the museum campus.
Is this really where you thought you would be at this stage?
Absolutely. Our team is continually working daily. I have the utmost faith, and then I'm sure you'll be able to come back to this show and say, he said it then. But again, these projects take time.
You say there's no drop-down date, but you have a ballpark of when we do have to make a decision.
Every day it costs more money. My focus and target was to make sure that we're moving dirt, that we're in the ground in 2025. And so I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make sure that we win Super Bowl trophies here, that we build a world-class stadium, and that we have a major impact in the community.
Why does it matter if the Bears leave Chicago? That one question, asked by a girl from Dallas, wondering why people care so much about the Bears' possible move to Arlington Heights, sparked a flurry of thoughts. What does it mean to be a Chicago Bears fan? What do the Chicago Bears mean to this city? And ultimately, what does this city mean to me? So let's explore the history of the team we find ourselves enamored with, representing who we are as a city, representing who we are, period. Professor, take it away.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, what you just heard there on the opening was Kevin Warren, who's I forgot what his exact title is. I think it's President of Football Operations, something like that, for the Chicago Bears, talking about the new stadium deal, right? It's on everybody's mind. Your friend from Dallas was asking about it. Why are the Bears going to move out of the city? What does that mean? Is it relevant? I think different people have different opinions on that. But to me, I've always felt some pride, right? When you see the shots of the game, when you're watching them on TV, whether you're at the game and they show the city of Chicago, they show that stadium right on the lake, you get to see our awesome skyline. I don't know, man, that's really cool. And maybe that's just like meatball part of me, or like just a rah-rah. But I don't think you're going to get that same effect panning over Arlington Heights. No disrespect, I went to Arlington Heights today, actually.
We play basketball in a court in Arlington Heights, actually.
It's true. Maybe we'll get to see that court. Maybe they'll show us playing basketball.
Actually, I might have just become pro, moved to Arlington Heights just so we can be part of the pan of the city.
Nah, man. I mean, if you poll this city, it's a Bears city. The city has two baseball teams, right? So that's always divided. They got the Bulls, and everybody's sick of Jerry's crap and just kind of apathetic towards the Bulls, and they're never really going to do anything. The Blackhawks were fun, when they had their titles, but it's still, I think, more niche in this town. It's probably 90% of the city probably can't name more than 4 Blackhawk players. It's still kind of niche. It's the Bears, man. It brings the city together. The big historic names. Man, they've been in this city for over 100 years.
Yeah.
Dating all the way back to 1921. So to move them out of Chicago would be like a really big deal.
Well, when that question was asked, it just kind of got me like I was like on a monologue. And it's interesting because it's like yeah, I mean, these feelings started coming up in me that I don't even know if I cared that much. It just got me genuinely thinking about what does it mean if a team is in the place that they are? And I was also at some point, generations later, it won't matter. There's going to be all of us currently who grew up with the Bears in the city who are they need to be here, they have to be here. But there's so many teams that don't play even in the city that they say that they're out in the suburbs or whatever. That's a lot of teams. The Cowboys aren't in Dallas, right? They're in
Arlington.
Yeah, which whatever is if that's greater
The
Dallas. But, like,
Giants and Jets don't even play in New York. They play in New Jersey.
how absolutely insane, dude. Like, yeah,
It's ridiculous.
like nothing matters really anyways. But
Yeah.
it becomes this question, like literally it became this question of like the identity of like me as a person, which got us thinking, about like, what do
Mhm.
teams actually mean? And there is eventually, yeah, there's gonna be a group of, generations down the road if they move out that I'm like, whatever, they're there, but that's still my football team, and Arlington Heights isn't that far. But yeah, it's an interesting like there is something real about you're here, you're living here, they're here, they're like, I mean that that lakefront's so pretty too, and like
Yeah. It's crazy to think about. And part of, you heard Kevin Warren there list off a bunch of events that they would try to plan for in this new Soldier Field. He's talking about like the Big Ten championship, bowl games, Super Bowl, college football stuff, concerts, all these things. And I think part of the hang up is there's just not going to be enough events for the city to justify putting funding into the stadium. Because we talked about in a previous podcast, right? Like the McCaskies are not very wealthy. All of their equity and wealth is tied up into the Bears. They don't have a lot of independent financial means to build a stadium and own a stadium on their own. They need help from the city. And if the city's going to put this money in, they're going to want to see some money come back out of it.
Yeah.
And with the Bears, they haven't had a lot of playoff success, right? So you're looking at 10 events a year at this stadium that are guaranteed, and then whatever else you can get to fill it. They're going to have some concerts and things like that. But if there was even talk of 2 NFL teams in Chicago, a little rumor, but I mean that's just probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
But that would increase that from 10 to 20, right? That's what LA is able to do, right? With the Rams and the Chargers. That's why they got funding for that brand new stadium. That's why the Giants and Jets got a brand new stadium, is because they can double the amount of revenue from that stadium, and the city is more willing to put money into that because they're going to get more money back out of it.
Mm.
So, and I don't think Chicago is going to have 2 teams, which is ironic because I don't know if you knew, but they did have 2 teams at one point.
Tell us about it, Prof.
Yeah, and the Bears were actually one of the ones that moved. So, little history lesson. The Bears basically started out in 1920, and George Halas here, he bought this team for like $100. It was $100 to own a franchise in when they're creating the NFL. And this dude did not have $100. So $100 in 1920 is, a decent amount of money. So he actually commissioned this guy who owned this corn product farm or company called A.E. Staley. And the Bears were actually first known as the Decatur Staleys. They actually came from the suburbs, Decatur. They played there. They were called the Decatur Staleys. And Halas played and coached that team. And then after the first season, A.E. Staley was his name. He's like, yo, this is going to be big. It's going to be too big for Decatur. You have to move to Chicago. So, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
Sorry, Decatur.
Too big for Decatur. And then that's the irony of what we're talking about, right? It's like, oh, now we're going to move from Chicago to Arlington Heights when we came from the suburbs 100 years ago. So yeah, that's how they moved to Chicago in 1921. And then they changed their name from the Staleys to the Bears in 1922. And they've basically been the Bears ever since. Oh yeah. So when they got to Chicago, there was already a team here, the Chicago Cardinals, which are the NFL's oldest team, actually. And so the Chicago Cardinals, not too happy, right? That they've got another rival team to compete with. And they competed for 40 years, They had 2 teams. And the Bears were just dominating. They were winning championships. They were going to championships. And basically the Chicago Cardinals had to file for bankruptcy. They just were not able to compete.
That's so dark. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's
they
dark,
just
man.
they just Walmarted.
Yeah.
They just Walmarted the Cardinals, and the mom and pop Chicago Cardinals we can't function anymore
compete with this shit.
With this big box team.
So what happened was, right around the time the AFL started, the NFL was getting worried that the AFL was a competing league. At that time, the AFL, which is now the AFC, right? That's why there's the AFC and the NFC. The NFC is the original NFL teams. The AFC is the original AFL teams. So the AFL was up and coming, and the NFL was worried about different markets. And they basically told the Chicago, like, look, one of you has to move to St. Louis because we're afraid the AFL is going to take that market away from us. And you have two teams, so that's kind of, we've got too many eggs in this basket. We already have this market. We need one of you guys to move here so the AFL doesn't take it. And broke-ass Cardinals, drew the short straw because George Halas was not going anywhere because the Bears were winning a bunch of championships. And, maybe by the 60s it had cooled off, but they were winning a lot in the 40s. And so, yeah, that's how the Chicago Cardinals ended up making the move to St. Louis and becoming the St. Louis Cardinals. And then eventually in like the late 80s, they moved to Arizona, and now they're the Arizona Cardinals. And you always think of the Arizona Cardinals as like a franchise that doesn't really matter in the NFL, right? Nobody ever considers them like a blue blood or but they are the oldest NFL franchise.
Their
Arizona
lineage
Cardinals.
comes from the oldest NFL franchise.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, it was pretty interesting, man. So like, it's ironic that all the steps the Staleys and the Bears, whatever, took to get to Chicago, and the history of playing in Chicago and doing all that, to here now we're in 2024 and we're talking about moving out of that. And I know, like, history and tradition is, tradition. I read an interesting quote that tradition is basically peer pressure by ghosts, and so what does it really
It's
matter?
not, what is it? Yeah, that's such a good question. Or such a, yeah, like tradition is kind of this like non-tangible
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
really.
it's like a loyalty to something that maybe is outside of your purview, right? You don't know why you're necessarily loyal to it, but you're just loyal to it because the people before you were. And so you kind of feel like you need to be as well. You don't want to be the one that breaks whatever cycle is happening.
Well, like as I think about the Bears not being in Chicago, I have like two thoughts, which is like one, which is like it doesn't really matter. Like I'm probably still gonna watch football.
Yeah.
But there's another
of
part
course.
of me that is truly like, but come on, dog, like you left and you still want me to support you, like
Yeah.
like I'm still here, like it's like I'm sitting with all of that because it really is like the name that I like. For anyone that's met me, there's like I'm very like I love being from West Rogers Park in the city, and Chicago's like a thing, and it like does mean something when I meet people who live here, born here, went to the same public school system as me, like all these things. And like I have friends who are like, if they go to Arlington Heights, I'm not gonna watch them anymore. And part of me is like, shut up. Like you probably
Yeah,
will.
that's a
Like I
little
know that's like
extreme.
an emotional, that's like an emotional reaction, but that's the kind of shit you're getting. This is a team that these people grew up and watched forever, and they're having this emotional reaction, which is like it's like betrayal. I think that's kind of what it's like, this feeling of like you have betrayed me, man. I think
You know what
that's
the Bears would turn into? They turn into that annoying friend that you have that's from the suburbs but says they're from Chicago, and you're like, "No, you're from Chicago." Like when they introduce people, you're like, "I'm from Chicago." No, you're from Naperville. You're not from Chicago. That's what the Bears would turn into.
And that's a uh like I don't, yeah, that is a problem. And whatever, I don't even care, but it's like
Yeah,
I can feel it. It feels something happens inside of my body. I won't like treat you any differently, but there is a part of me that's like, no, you're
can't call
not, but
yourself the
fine.
Chicago Bears. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like I still like you, but yeah, you change. Things change. Like
yeah,
this is, we're talking about like a sports team and a giant
yeah,
institute, but this is the like feeling that comes up in people, which is like this. You're like creating a human feeling on a team,
yeah.
which is I think the like, what does a team mean? It's like you're basically like,
It's representation, right?
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
you make it feels like it's a representation of you, and where you come from, what you're all about, your history, your interests, traditions, passions, whatever, are linked to that city. And for something to like move themselves away from it, move themselves away from you, both from a physical sense and maybe even in like an emotional sense, it probably would feel a little different. I mean, it would pass, just like you said, right? It'd be like
Of course it
weird
would.
for first couple seasons, and then you'd be like, whatever. They play up north now, and they're the Arlington Heights. They're Bears,
Yeah, becomes like, you know what, I'm not gonna go there, but I'm obviously gonna like I'll watch it, but I'm not gonna go out there. And then like a couple of years later, you're like, hey, we're making a road trip out to Arlington Heights to go watch
Yeah,
the
it's like
Bears.
going to Ravinia. Let's watch a concert. Yeah, we'll just take the train up there. It'll be fine.
There's
So,
in New England, there's a train that I think goes from Boston to the stadium and back, like directly into. So like that is, a way to like keep it linked between the city.
yeah,
If you could create like a straight shot in some way to be like, sure, we're not in the city, but
they
like we
probably
can.
would need to, honestly. I mean, I don't know. I feel like people kind of argue back and forth about because right now Soldier Field is not easy to get in and out of. It's just not. It's kind of a pain in the ass. And it's like, would that be easier or more difficult with Arlington Heights, right? You got the train station there. Still, there's not like a ton of roads that lead to Arlington Heights, like 9094 is your way to get there. And game days, it's probably going to suck. And like,
90
the
is
train's probably
trash.
going to be full.
90's trash on just a regular day.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I feel still 80% confident that they're not going to leave Chicago, because I know Kevin Warren wants to stay in Chicago. He keeps talking about how he wants to stay in Chicago. He's just trying to do like a leverage play, I think, especially because they bought the property in Arlington Heights, which I also think was a leverage play. Probably not a good one because the McCaskies don't have any money. So I don't know what they're going to do with that property in Arlington Heights now that they bought it. They're going to have to repurpose it for something. But I think he has every intention of staying here. His eyes are big. He used to be, I don't know if you know, but he used to be the Big Ten commissioner. So he's got a lot of college football ties. He's got a lot of ins with those programs. So he sees it just beyond the Bears, right? You build this big facility downtown Chicago. Now Chicago can also be a college championship hub, because it is like the Midwest hub, right? You're all the schools in Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, Iowa. Like Chicago's the biggest city in all of those places. And for those Big Ten campuses to have the Big Ten championship here, both football and basketball, to host a bowl game, right, for like the Midwest, because all those bowls are out west or down south or whatever, where it's warmer. To be able to have some of those meaningful games, I think his eyes really light up with stuff like that. He's probably selling that to the McCaskies too, for like, sharing some of that revenue. So
what's the benefit for them to like be in Arlington Heights? Just more space, build a new stadium.
Yeah, they have this whole plan of like a Soldier Field campus almost, where you have shops and like kid stuff, like like a playground, and like all these events that they can throw there, just like way more space, right? Stores, Bears Mania, like almost like a little Wrigleyville, but for the Bears, right? There's a lot more space up there to do things like
I mean, that is like the benefit, I guess, the pro from looking at it outside of like just this like which is almost impossible to not have this emotional feeling to that, like from just an outside perspective, like the what I guess what they could do with the space out there. But I've seen some pretty cool renderings, of like the space around here that they could do. It's an interesting
They're
thing.
just
Of
limited, right? Because they're blocked by the lake. They're blocked by a massive body of water. They can't build on one side, and the other
now
side is like the highway. And like,
let's throw a stadium, a floating stadium.
There you go.
On the water, dude. Now we're
That would
cooking
be
on
awesome.
some like I mean,
Yes.
Canada had an airport. Billy Bishop was you landed in the water, and then for a while you took a boat. Shout out Nicole, who big fan of the podcast. They had a boat that you would take to get from the airport onto the land for a while until they created a bridge. But we had a floating stadium in the lake.
That would be dope. Then you could have a casino attached to it.
Right, you could
sports book, stadium. I think that's going to be good times. Shout out to Rachel if she's listening. I'm sure she would go to the Combo Stadium casino.
Okay, cool. So as we kind of wrap this up, thinking about just like it's an interesting thing to experience, like the emotional ties that individuals have to a team. And this team, football just in general, I think you find like just your spirit being so deeply tied in a big city. I think maybe it's interesting. It can be kind of hard, I guess, to be so deeply connected to. There's so many things going on, but you have this team that means like your blood, sweat, tears, your heart, is this team, and sort of they represent that for us.
I think also people in Chicago, they have a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder, right? Like, LA, New York, the big coasts, right? LA's, the sports teams can be the fourth most popular thing in the city at any given moment. New York's, everybody always talks about New York, right? They're always in the limelight. They also have a million things going on. With Chicago, it's like, hey, we're a big city. We deserve a seat at the big boy table. But we're also kind of that Midwest feel, right? Where we're like, this is ours. We're going to root for these guys. We're going to show up no matter what. This is the only show in town kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's interesting. I just feel like George Halas moved this team here in 1921, man. I don't know how he'd feel us moving it out 103 years later, right? It's just feels weird. So I'm all for it. Team Chicago. Obviously Team Arlington Heights happens, then we'll have to reconsider the podcast. No, I'm just kidding. We'll keep
Bears in the Arlington Heights neighborhood will be the updated version.
Oh
of
my
this
God,
podcast.
that does not roll off the tongue.
It's a little long. So as we finish up today's episode, the Bears' first game of the season will be happening this Sunday. So tell us some stuff that we should be looking out for in that game.
Yeah, let's do some football, right? So Bears versus Titans. It feels like two kind of similar-ish teams where they've had a lot of turnover. Both fan bases, I think, are excited about what they see. Two young quarterbacks. I would look out for the defenses. Both defenses are going to be pretty good. That defensive line in Tennessee is pretty good. They have Simmons and Sweat on the defensive line. I would watch out for those guys. Caleb needs to probably get the ball out quick. Those guys will be in the backfield. And, the two new offenses. So I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair. I think the spread is 4.5. Bears minus 4.5, which is like the Vegas zone, which means like Vegas doesn't really know what to do with it, so they just throw 4.5 on there. I would probably take the Titans to cover that, but the Bears should probably win. I'm thinking 17-14 Bears win late on a Cairo Santos field goal. But I'm looking at I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think each defense will probably come away with a turnover, and the Bears defense will outplay their offense, and they'll come out with a low-scoring victory.
Hell yeah! But I'm
gonna pit my article here.
Yes.
So I will be doing weekly picks, a picks article on bearstalk.com. I usually pick 3 against the spread. Those usually come out either Wednesday night or Thursday during the day. So I probably will have the Titans covering as part of my pick 3 this week. But yeah, be on the lookout for that if you are a gambling type of person.
Hell yeah! Well, thank you, Professor. Look forward to chatting with you next week as we break down what went down in Caleb's first game.
All right, buddy.